All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you because we have a very special episode here on Sunday, December 15th. I'm happy to be here with you guys and to tell you all about what's happening because we have a great guest on. We have a guest that I'm very happy to have on, and I wasn't expecting it. I'm very appreciative that she's taking a little bit of time today. She's got a busy schedule, but she's going to give us some time to find out more about what's going on in Syracuse, what's happening in New Jersey, and just to tell us about her experiences. It's a phenomenal story. So without much more ado, I'm just going to get right into it because I have Justine Murray, who's on the phone with me, and everyone can see her picture here. I have a picture, Justine, of you with a sign that's Votes for Women, which I find a very interesting photo because it's something that you normally hear a lot of Democrats speak about, but you're not a Democrat. You're a conservative and a Republican, am I right?
Yep. Yeah, you can be, women's rights, it's not supposed to be a conservative versus liberal thing. And sadly, we've seen a lot of radical leftists through this modern feminism try to make it a liberal issue. And it's really sad because you see a lot of the same people who are supposedly for feminism, for women, once you see a woman who is a conservative or a woman who doesn't march in lockstep form with the leftist ideologies, all of a sudden that woman is shut down. She is called a traitor, a sellout, and told that she has to be quiet.
Yeah, they say that a lot. And it's really sad because that's not how it works. Or at least that's how I've always known it to be. It's freedom, rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. When the founders wrote that, it wasn't about this person or this ideology. It was for everyone. It was for all Americans. Am I right?
Right. Yep.
So before I get further on this, I want to take a second. I want to take a step back because I know I jumped right into it with you, and I'm not wasting any time because there's a lot. You've got a phenomenal record, and I want to get into all of it. But I want to take a second to take a step back and just tell people, who is Justine Murray? I mean, you're an actress. You've been on the show Mel and Elle. You've been in front of the camera, behind the camera. You've been a reporter. You've been an intern for John Katko, a member of Congress. You're the chief of staff for the New York Federation of College Republicans. I mean, your resume goes on and on. Can you tell us, how did that happen? I mean, how old are you now?
Sure. I just turned 21 a few months ago, and I've always been involved in my community. Since I was younger, my parents have always been involved in our local community, and it just kind of, the bug has been passed down to me as well. I love politics. I love helping people, specifically, starting out in New Jersey and then moving on elsewhere. And I love acting. I love performing. I love meeting people. So I always love getting involved rather than just going to school and not really doing anything else. I always think it's great to try to fulfill your passions or find what your passions are at a young age. And that's what I've done. I don't know if I've discovered everything I'm interested in doing yet. I don't think any of us have, as college students and even older. But yeah, it's really great to get involved in different things at a young age.
No, absolutely. And you've definitely done that. That's without question. So one of the things I would wonder about is you've done so much, and throughout your life, I have to ask the question because we see schools nowadays, they seem to be more radicalized. We see more of an insistence in the education system, even from the earliest grades and definitely in the colleges, to be more and more progressive, more democratic socialist or communist. I mean, look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Most recently here at Binghamton University, we have Portland. There are many examples of this. How has that affected you?
Yeah, so specifically, we've seen leftist bias on college campuses. Clearly, Binghamton has seen this with the recent. It looks like your table, your college Republicans table, was mobbed. Students surrounded you guys, acting violently. We just had a similar situation happen at Syracuse. After a string of racist incidents, which were terrible, a group of protesters, they've marked themselves as the hashtag Not Again SU movement, and this group of protesters claim to be fighting against bigotry. But sadly, we've seen some protesters promote bigotry. So it's kind of going against the cause here. What happened to me is that I was reporting as a student reporter for campus reform on the protests, specifically on a list of demands that students were making, which included that the chancellor allow a same-race rooming selection process where students can pick the race of their roommates in housing. And when they were discussing these demands in a sit-in that lasted for an entire week at our school, students occupying an entire building, I was there filming as a journalist along with a lot of other journalists from different outlets, but I was the only one singled out and targeted. All of a sudden, someone pointed me out and said, why do you keep coming back here? Who are you? Students circled around me and said, you work for a conservative outlet. Conservative ideas are what causes bigoted incidents to occur. You're not welcome here. And by the way, this is a public space. I'm a student. I have a right to be there. And it got almost violent to a point where at a forum before, a bunch of students blocked off the exit to an auditorium that we were in, so I could not get out of the building. And when I was able to push past them, they circled around me again, started screaming, tried to chase me when I was trying to get out, saying, don't let her leave, don't let her get away. I yelled for help. There were a lot of adults and administrators speaking at this forum. Only one person originally helped me, and he had to sneak me out of the basement of this building. And when he was doing so, students were still chasing us. And it was frightening. It was nighttime. I had to get out of there. I filed a police report, and the campus police, this was with the campus police, and they said they would, investigate what happened. Nothing has ever come of it. Yet all of the incidents that have occurred lately that people are assuming were right-wing, the campus police responded fairly quickly to. Now, the same students who are protesting the supposed right-wing incidents, even though there's no proof that they were right-wing, we just know that they were bigoted and wrong. Those same students are saying that the school doesn't respond. And in fact, they're calling for the chancellor to resign because they believe the chancellor is enabling racism for some reason because he won't give in to three of the demands. Three of their, they did 19 demands, and the chancellor agreed to 16 of those 19 demands, but he did not agree to the same race rooming demand. So students are not happy. And just recently, they held a walkout saying that the chancellor better resign until January 13th, or else, quote, there will be consequences.
Oh my. And they love to say that. They love to say there's going to be a consequence. You have to do what we say or else. And I find that very troubling. I heard that at Binghamton University. And I heard that with the protesters from Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow and from the Citizen Action, the fringe left. They always make demands. And if you don't listen to their demands, then it's your problem. And then you are going to be threatened with being assaulted. And often they do this to young women. They've done it to minorities or small groups of people. Just like in Binghamton, they actually targeted. They made a call to have a crowd, a mob of 200 come to surround and antagonize and harass 3 students because they thought that was fair. And their purpose was to harass and intimidate. And it sounds like you had the same kind of experience yourself.
Yep. This is not an isolated experience. It really escalated this month with the protests. Actually, the weekend after this all occurred, where I was mobbed, a professor approached me in the dark when I was attending a basketball game, and she grabbed me by the shoulder, threatened me repeatedly, telling me that I may not know who she is, but she knows who I am, and I better watch out. I better watch out for, quote, my reputation. I reported this as a complaint of harassment to the administration, and the administration basically responded with a lot of bureaucratic gibberish, assigned me like a counselor, and they once again said that they would investigate this. But, nothing has come of it yet.
A counselor for you, a counselor. You don't need a counselor. That teacher needs to be addressed and dressed down, as we would say back in the military. That doesn't sound right. And it's not like Syracuse hasn't had a bunch of problems. I mean, wasn't it just recently that Syracuse University, I believe it was November 27th, there were reports that Syracuse had professors receiving threatening anti-Semitic emails. And that's one of the things that I believe Governor Cuomo reacted to when he spoke out, although he didn't speak about Binghamton University. They were very selective in their outrage. And they were speaking about how anti-Semitism at Syracuse University is not allowed, but yet they didn't mention anything about what happened to you. That seems odd.
Right. Yeah, of course, because in a lot of these incidents, if you can, pinpoint or assume that whatever is happening is instigated by a right-wing person, then the administration automatically condemns it quickly, speaks out about it. But when something happens in the name of leftivism, excuse me, or when a conservative student or a conservative professor gets harassed, shut down, bullied, something excuse me again, if something like that happens, normally the school will say nothing about it. It will not be covered in the mainstream media. You will not hear anything about what happened. With the anti-Semitic incident, there were actually a few anti-Semitic incidents that occurred during this entire string of racist incidents. So just to give some clarification, the racist incidents included anti-Semitic incidents, supposedly anti-Native American incidents, anti-Asian incidents, and anti-Black incidents. With the anti-Semitic incidents, there were a couple of swastikas, one etched in a dormitory, one etched in a snowbank off campus. But then a professor received an email calling her a monstrous-looking K-word. Right. And, I believe that it got pretty fair coverage, but that was not the first anti-Semitic incident that occurred. Last year and the year before, there were a few anti-Semitic incidents in the name of progressivism and Palestinian rights. But because it was in the name of progressivism, nobody called it out, and we weren't allowed to speak up about it. When I was a freshman in my dorm, the residence director taped up an image of the Star of David being crossed out in our lobby, and it stated on it, "Boycott Israel." And this was right next to a photo of Martin Luther King that he taped up. And when I asked him about why this anti-Semitic display is up here, he said it was to honor Black History Month. Well, Martin Luther King was a staunch advocate for Israel, against anti-Zionism and against anti-Semitism. Right. So he would have been turning in his grave. But it's sad how when I called out this professor and we complained to the administration, Nothing came of it. Then the year later, I went undercover to an organization where students at my college can receive internship credits if they work for this group. It's called the Syracuse Peace Council, and there at the event where I filmed undercover, a former professor expressed support for Hamas. Other leaders stated that we can commit violence against Zionists if since it's a racist and a violent ideology, and also that there shouldn't be an Israel, there shouldn't be a Jewish state. It's just wrong. All Jews can go to Florida and Brooklyn and Syracuse, stereotypical places that
Right.
you would imagine Jewish people to go. Yet the school said nothing really about these incidents. In fact, I think you can still receive internship credit if you work for this group. The school set out a statement saying they support academic freedom, so they wouldn't take away credits if you work for this group. Meanwhile, I was told during that same year I could not intern for a Republican. I asked if I could receive credits for interning for Congressman Katko for his campaign.
Right.
And the school said I could not receive credits because as a 501c organization, they cannot endorse a specific political view. Meanwhile, they're allowed to give credits to students who work for a clearly anti-Semitic group. So I see a double standard there.
At the very least. I mean, at the very least. And this is really interesting to me. In a perverse kind of way, it's very interesting because it was just a little while ago. It was back in July 20th of 2018, where it was reported by no less than the Washington Post about the case from Louisiana, where a judge found that Jews are a protected race and that they are part of the 1964 legislation on now I'm missing the word. It's the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and that they are a protected class under that. And I know a lot of people say, well, that's, President Trump is the one responsible for that. Except, no, it was actually a Louisiana court that set the precedent on this, and President Trump's signature of the executive order against campuses promoting anti-Semitism, which this sounds exactly like and this was one of the things he was citing, is that, people want to take it on against Trump, but they're missing the point of, one, colleges have been promoting this, and events like what happened here in Binghamton that have been silencing free speech, that have been skating by the media and not having this addressed publicly. And something has to be done to stop that. And that's what his executive order was about. How did you feel about that executive order?
Right. I felt closure. I mean, I stood next to the president when he signed the free speech executive order in March. And I was one of 10 students who got to stand on stage with him in a room of, it felt like 100 or a large number of students. And these students all experienced some pretty crazy anti-free speech violations, a lot of First Amendment violations that were worse. Well, I felt that were worse than what I experienced. I mean, what happened to me is that we weren't allowed to have our Young Americans for Freedom chapter on campus because the school ruled that the U.S. Constitution is exclusionary to some students.
What?
And
that's insanity right there.
Yep. Oh, and by the way, the school, our communication school, has the First Amendment plastered on their building, yet they are so against the First Amendment. So it's just kind of funny. But the Constitution is the governing law that we abide by here. I mean, you come to America, you abide by the Constitution. It's what provides the rights for students and provides the rights for these leftists to do what they're doing, to be able to preach on campus. Without the Constitution, these students who are walking into their lofty classrooms with their Starbucks and complaining every day about how miserable their lives are, they wouldn't even be able to have that opportunity to go to college. So, it shows that our generation, we have a problem with our generation being quite ungrateful. And, I think we need a history lesson here. But going back to the free speech executive order and then the anti-Semitism executive order, I felt closure from both. And I think that President Trump is really targeting two big issues, at least how I see it. I'm Jewish, and I've experienced First Amendment violations, and I've experienced anti-Semitism on campus. And same goes for a lot of other students. But what was interesting was that some of the same professors that I have on campus who complained about the free speech executive order, saying that hate speech shouldn't count as free speech, all of a sudden complained that Trump was violating free speech when he signed this anti-Semitism order.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yep. All of a sudden, media pundits and leftist professors who have clearly never been for free speech in the past because they call to, for regulations on students' First Amendment rights, all of a sudden they're free speech vigilantes when it comes to the president signing this executive order against anti-Semitism, and all of a sudden they're afraid that their right to, say anti-Semitic things in the classroom is going to get shut down. So it's pretty insane. And what this executive order does is that it takes away federal funding from colleges who are caught allowing anti-Semitism through curriculums or professors. It's not anti-free speech. When you're a professor, you're not supposed to teach your political view in the first place. But when you go on top of that, and you have actually, what really sparked this was the UNC, a merged conference with UNC and Duke in this past March, where it was supposed to be a conference on Gaza, on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, yet it was just an anti-Semitic hate fest. A reporter named Ami Horowitz went undercover, and they invited a rapper to this hate fest, sang a song. I think it was called "I'm in Love with a Jew," and the rapper said, "Okay, guys, let's be anti-Semitic together. Think Mel Gibson." Ooh. Now, look. As horrible as I think that event was, the campus is allowed to have it, or students are allowed to have it. But when the administration sponsors it, or when the school sponsors it, and even more so when they receive federal funding to have these events, which UNC and Duke did, they received federal funding to host this anti-Semitic hate fest, then that's wrong. No college is entitled to receive federal funding. It's a privilege to get federal funding. And if you're caught violating free speech rights, violating the rights of your students, or being anti-Semitic, just like if you were caught, harboring racism, or, a bigotry towards any other ethnicity through your administration, then you don't have to receive federal funding.
I think that's really the point of it all. And I know that there was actually Representative John Katko. He did make a statement about this back on November 21st, before the actions of the president, even before some of the reporting on what was going on at Syracuse University came about. It was in the Auburn Press, and he mentioned, and I'm quoting him, "Discrimination and hate speech of any kind must never be tolerated. I support a full and robust investigation into these actions and believe the perpetrators must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Syracuse University has long welcomed students, teachers, and visitors from around the globe, and it's critical that it remain a safe and tolerant place." Now, the thing that really catches me about that statement, besides the fact that in my district, Representative Anthony Brindisi, who happens to be a Democrat, didn't make any comment about similar actions in Binghamton University and the assault on conservatives and Republicans, students at Binghamton University. But the thing that gets me is, I know that many of the college Republicans, many students who are Republican or conservative or libertarian, have a concern about being able to speak out because they're afraid of the same thing you're speaking about, these violent reprisals and this silencing of free speech and the administration's protecting these radical leftist organizations. How does that, have you heard that from some of your fellow students as well?
A little bit. So, do you mind just elaborating a little bit more so regarding, are you talking about kind of the double standards?
Yes.
Yeah. So, at Syracuse, the open conservatives on campus who will actually speak out against this double standard is the number is small. I'm open, and I have one or two other friends who will have private conversations about how we believe, how ridiculous this double standard is, where if something even violent happens against a conservative student, the university does nothing about it. Nobody says a word about it. Yet, when it's against another, when it's against someone else, or a liberal, or a supposed identity threat, then you see the school getting national media attention. We have discussed this a little bit, but conservatives on campus are afraid to speak. At Syracuse, take my instance of getting mobbed, for example. When I went to the sit-in where I was mobbed, I wasn't even speaking. I was just there and present to film. People just knew me because they knew some of the reports I did in the past, and they know I'm affiliated with a conservative media outlet. So they just went to attack me. They didn't know me personally. So the fact that you don't even have to say anything on campus, if at least one person knows you're a conservative, you're at a risk. The fact that that's true, makes it 10 times worse, or 10 times scarier to actually start speaking, or actually start expressing views on campus. So other students who believe that there's a double standard here, they're too afraid to speak up about it.
Well, see, that's one of the reasons why I like doing this and bringing this up. And I like the fact that, and I do want to commend Bill Spada of New Jersey 101.5. I know he had you on. He did an article about this. And I commend the media that have talked about this and brought this up. I want to commend Representative Katko for standing up for his constituents and standing up for you and saying that this cannot continue at Syracuse University or any university in America, and that we have to fight anti-Semitism, and we have to fight those repressive individuals, those authoritarians in the fringe left, like Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, otherwise known as Plot, and Indivisible New York, and the rest of their ilk. I do this, and I want to have these conversations, and I thank you for coming on, because I want every college student, I want everyone in America who is a Republican, a conservative, a libertarian, I want them to know you're not alone. As much as the media wants to make it look like we are, 1 out of 1,000, that's not true. There's as many of us as there is of anybody else. We are part of America. We are as vital as anyone else. We have as good an idea. We have as many rights and as much right to freedom of speech as anyone in this nation. And no one should feel empowered to attack another group of people just because of a political ideology. That is wrong. And we need to, and that's why I want to have this, because when the more we speak up about this, the more people who come together and say, no, we agree, no matter what their ideology is, the more we take those radical fringe groups and take away their power, because their power is intimidation, because they scream and yell, but they're not the majority. And I think that's an important thing.
Yep.
Now, I know we only had half an hour, and it goes by so fast. It really does.
It does. Yeah.
Because there's so many things to talk about, and there was so much more. I wanted to talk about the 2020 race. I know the congressional race. Actually, your home is in New Jersey, but you go to school here in New York, in the New York 24th District. I know that besides the New York 22nd being a at-risk toss-up race, and I expect it to be in the top 3 in the nation. But even in New Jersey, in the New Jersey 2nd to New Jersey 3rd, there are races that Democrats are in deep trouble because they're not speaking up for their constituents. I don't know if either of those districts are your district for your home, but do you see is there a lot of similarity between what happens in New York in this kind of politically motivated attack and what you're seeing in New Jersey?
Right. So, going back to kind of the congressional races and certain districts turning blue, we've experienced that just like New York is experiencing. My district, I live in the 11th district in New Jersey, and we have a new congresswoman. She's a big liberal. She's a nice person actually, but she's just she beat someone who was we had a conservative running, and we've had a conservative congressman for a while now, for a very long time. Unfortunately, he retired. He was a great guy. And now we've seen some Democrats really reacting to the presidential election. You see kind of a pendulum where, okay, the presidential election, Republicans had a big win, and now you have the liberals kind of pushing back. So at the latest congressional election, yes, it was expected to have some districts turn blue. Regarding intolerance on college campuses, I work with a few students who go to New Jersey schools, Rutgers.
That's my old school. That's where I went to college.
Yep. And they've experienced a lot of leftist bias as well. I have a friend who actually had an event for his club denied. I think the event was called the